And hello, welcome once again to It's a Frankly Harry podcast. I'm your host, Frank Weber. So glad that you could join me again here in the forest this week. I've got a really great show for you. I'm going to be talking first about the Super Bowl that was just played here a couple of days ago. And this isn't going to be a discussion on so much on what happened in the game itself or the NFL's system of doing things, which are both things that I could probably say plenty on. But the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl by a lot. It was a blowout. The final score wasn't as close as it appeared in the end. And congratulations to them. Looks like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are human. I was just looking up previous Super Bowl results. They did lose one a few years ago, for those of you who may have forgotten. But I love Patrick Mahomes. I think he's a good dude and a great ambassador for my university and his university, Texas Tech. Really wish he had played on some better teams there. But mainly what I'm going to be talking about, this is the first one that I've really kind of tuned into in a few years. I've been kind of ignoring it in most of the NFL season, really. But I don't know. There's something that's been going on for quite a while, at least a couple of decades. And this is outside of the game itself, but there's something I think really wrong with the Super Bowl's presentation these days. And I don't know exactly what it is. If it's the broadcasting crews or commentary teams or the way just the overall broadcast, camera angles, it could be other things, could be the commercials, could be the halftime show. I had no idea who Kendrick Lamar is. He did the show this year, and I wasn't really paying a hell of a lot of attention to it. I was in the kitchen getting food or something like that, but it seemed somewhat patriotic, but then again, some people have some other takes on it. I thought at the very end of the show he got bleeped out or some crazy shit or like that. Or at least that's what it seemed like to me. But anyway, the halftime shows are pretty much over the top. I guess a few of the fans find them entertaining, but generally the folks who can afford to go to the Super Bowl, and I would argue a substantial percentage of the fans, probably aren't too entertained by a lot of the halftime shows these days. I think I mentioned the commercials, right? The commercials seem to be lacking somehow. I don't know. If there was one thing the NFL might do, and I know it's not exactly like they're going to take my advice, I would think that they would want to kind of do up their spectacle a little bit better somehow. The things that they can control, which presumably means not the outcome of the game or what exactly happens in the game, but I don't know, it's something needs to change, I think. Broadcast, commercials, halftime show, possibly other entertainment. It seems kind of, I don't know, there's a thing about a lot of these games, especially if your team isn't playing, right? Where if you watch them on TV, the atmosphere just feels fairly stale for some reason. And they used to be the Super Bowl has always had hype, but these days, I don't know, something's not clicking, something's not getting done, because there used to be a lot more revelry and pageantry, I think, to the entire ordeal. And I don't know if that's just because that was the way it was back when I was a youth, or, something has changed. They're focusing too much on a prescribed demographic, which is usually between 18 and 34 or 35 years old or something like that. But most of the people who are paying their bills are generally a little bit older than that. And that's true with a lot of things, not just the NFL, but that's something to think about. I know you'll probably forget about it as it's now the off season. You may forget about football for 6 months or so. But I don't know. You gotta control what you can control, and I don't know if that's the most important thing on the NFL's agenda or not. But I would try to pump up the Super Bowl a little bit more. Try to change a few things. You don't have to get super radical with it, but when I was a kid, they used to have. Speaking of commercials, and I know they don't actually make the commercials. I think a lot of other people make the commercials, and then they pay a shitload of money to put them on during the Super Bowl. But I remember a lot of the commercials from like the 70s, 80s, 90s were very memorable. And it seems stupid now, but even as a 10-year-old kid, watching Budweiser do the Bud Bowl during commercials where the bottles were playing football. It was like Bud against Bud Light, and then the cans were cheering for them and stuff. That's stupid as that is now. I don't know. That's just a radical idea for how you would change up the commercials there. And then that actual promotion changed a lot as the years went by. And, and that, of course, then it eventually faded out. And then, of course, the halftime show, I really wish there was more country artists, but then they would probably have someone like, well, she's not really country anymore. I don't know if Taylor Swift, who, of course, was at the game, I don't know if she has done a Super Bowl or not, Super Bowl halftime. But then they would have a lot of modern country on, which I'm not too thrilled about. Did Garth Brooks do a Super Bowl halftime once? I really don't remember. And then, of course, the overall broadcast. I don't really know what people are into a lot on that nowadays. Aaron Andrews was on the sideline, which was great, but, there's a new team at Fox here the last couple of years. But even, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, sorry, Troy, hate to say this about you, but they're not exactly as good as some of the announcers of old, and maybe it's not really fair to compare them, but anyway, that's just a little bit of commentary on my take on the Super Bowl broadcast, and I saw parts of it. I didn't really watch all of it. I have some other endeavors, other things that I'm dedicating time to and going to be busy with here for really the next couple of years, but anyway, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, because this is actually an interactive show, and you're welcome to leave comments, whether in the comment section or even send a direct message if you like. I'd be willing to read it on the show here in some future episode as well, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who might debate me on this and debate me over their love of NFL football and how things are in the market and the world today. So please let me hear from you on that. I do also want to bring up real quickly, and I'm not anti-football, and I'm not particularly anti-NFL either. I just think they do a lot of crazy stuff over there, and a lot of people really don't like the commissioner, Roger Goodell, yet he manages to hang on. One of those guys who I guess is pleasing to his bosses, the owners, but then the fans, sadly, they suffer there. Let me give you, I want to, this is not really just a time filler, but for those of you who may not know me, if I had to pick a favorite NFL team, I grew up in Texas, and it's always been the Dallas Cowboys. And unfortunately, when I became football aware, that was in the decline of the Cowboys under Tom Landry in the mid to late 80s. And then, of course, Jerry Jones came in, bought the team, and fired Landry and hired Jimmy Johnson. And then the team had a few years of very stellar success, 3 Super Bowls in 4 years and all that. So I was thinking, since the Eagles are a division rival and They were in the Super Bowl again this year. They've been in several the last few years. I'm just really concerned. Jerry he really does not seem committed to winning anymore. And of course, they just hired a new head coach in Brian Schottenheimer, whose dad was a head coach in the league, Marty. But that doesn't necessarily mean Brian will be. And I don't know if Brian is a yes man, because that's typically who Jerry has hired over the years. But the point is, with the Eagles being back in the Super Bowl this year, they now have won their second Super Bowl since the Cowboys last won theirs in the 1995 season. And the Eagles have also had other Super Bowl appearances and losing efforts. The same is true for the New York Giants. 2 Super Bowl wins, among some other appearances. And also during that time, the Redskins, which I still call them the Redskins, they have been pretty crummy. Haven't been to the playoffs a lot, have not been to a Super Bowl, but this year they made it to the NFC Championship game, where they lost to the Eagles, and making it that far into the playoffs is still further than the Cowboys have been since their last Super Bowl in 1995. And I know I was talking about shame last week and whether we should shame some people and not shame others and all that sort of thing. I don't think Jerry feels any kind of shame when comparing his team just to his division rivals. I mean, much less technically the Cowboys have some other rivals in the league, but to keep this simple, we'll just keep it in the division. But he has no shame. He doesn't seem to compare his team or to the accomplishments of the other team in the division. And most of the time, the Cowboys, most of these years, they have been built to compete and win, and we can beat these teams on the field on regular occasions. But when it comes to actually winning a championship, it can't be done. They have so much more, the other teams have so much more hardware to show for it. And now, maybe it took me a long time to have this realization, but maybe Jerry is one of those owners who really he wants to make money, and the league has made it to where these owners cannot really, not like the Cowboys are going to lose on money making here, but the NFL has made it to where these owners really don't have a lot of risk in taking ownership of the team. I mean, the rules are basically rigged in their favor. And so they can have a very suck-ass team and still make money. And if all they care about is making money, then Jerry has had his reward. But as y'all recall, or you may recall, when he first took over the team, first bought the team, he said, "We must win," in his Arkansas drawl. But I don't know. I think that's an empty platitude now. And I know there was a lot of different things that were going on back then. And Jimmy, his first coach, managed to build the team up. They had to build the team up in order to as part of making the business better back then. But after Jimmy left, it's just been downhill. And it reminded me of a story. Oh, before I go on from that point, I'm just saying, I think a lot of owners do want their teams to win in addition to making money. I mean, usually Super Bowl winning teams would get some kind of a boost, but for the kind of cash the Cowboys pull in every year and what you hear they're making off of every home game, maybe the motivation really isn't there for them anymore, is what I'm saying there. But I had a story. My brother and I, when we were teenagers or preteens, I can't remember, we spent a year in Richardson, Texas. This was in 1991, essentially. In July of 1991, the Dallas Morning News, back in the days of print newspaper, they have a section called High Profile, where they would profile somebody prominent in the Dallas-Fort Worth community. And that happened to be one day in July of that year, it happened to be Jerry Jones. And I remember thinking that even back then we really didn't like him very much, and we scratched out high profile and scratched out the high and put low on it. And then, of course, we drew, devil's horns and a devil's goatee and glasses on his face and everything. And I just thought it was just to get these random memories like that. They're always a lot of fun, but the sad thing is I don't know if people understand a lot of that stuff. I mean, it's tough on the fans. They want to win. They haven't won in a long time to win the big one, to win the Super Bowl. And then you have complacent owners who want to do things his way while your rivals are passing you by. It's just really, I don't know, really hurts, really feels wrong considering the greatness that is the franchise that it was until, well, at least the last Super Bowl win in 1995 or early 96. That was Super Bowl 30 over the Steelers. And just one last story on that, and I don't want to bore you if you don't want to listen to Cowboys lore here, but I watched that game, and the Cowboys won it, of course. That was the Larry Brown interception. And I remember thinking at the end of that, like, oh, that's great. 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. That's really terrific. There's a lot of teams that can't do that. But I got that weird gut feeling inside of me that said, I think this is going to be the last one for a while. And lo and behold, that's what it turned out to be. Couldn't really give you any reason for it at the time, but now I can certainly explain it away, at least I think. So let me do one more thing here real quick. So, of course, many of you know, if you've been listening to this show or even the old podcast for any amount of time, that I have a lot of pet peeves and I have a lot of observations in society, and there's one that I need to tell you about right now that I really need to get off my chest. And so I notice that every so often something becomes very popular, a saying or a phrase or maybe just a word becomes very popular in our society, and it catches on sort of like a fad, and will probably eventually die out. I say probably because I don't really know for sure, but usually they die out. Now, like the last 2 or 3 years, or 2 or 3 years ago, there was one where people were saying the word literally a lot. Like they were saying, oh, I'm going to literally get in my car, and then I'm going to literally turn the engine on, and I'm going to literally drive over to the grocery store and literally buy some groceries. And then I'm literally going to come back home and literally cook and eat some food. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that you did all that stuff, because you can't do any of that figuratively. I mean, you got to do it all literally, but apparently the word caught on, and then people, even some people I really liked and respected kept using that word, and I'm like, why do you have to use the word literally? I mean, I believe you that you did that, because there's, usually in real everyday life, there isn't a lot of figurative stuff that goes on. I mean, usually that's more for the world of the arts and literature, if you know what I mean. But so that, I think, is actually dying out a lot. But now we've got this new thing where I've been watching, studying videos and, sometimes presentations and things, and people they'll act like they're Willie Mays or something, because they'll in their discussion, they'll say, hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store, and say, hey, I'm going to turn on my car, and say, hey, I'm going to drive over to the store and go in and say, hey, shop for groceries and all this stuff. I mean, you'll notice it if you watch. I guess you can watch it on some TV shows. I see it more on YouTube videos and stuff, but they're always saying, say, hey, and now it's getting really annoying to me, and I'm having trouble, now that I'm telling you this. I mean, I'm going to be thinking about it all the time whenever I see it again, and hopefully I don't become addicted to it and go like, say, hey, consider this while watching the Super Bowl, like I did earlier in this show. Say, hey, consider those commercials, or say, hey, the announcers, or say, hey, the broadcast, that sort of thing. It's all over the place. It's really kind of crazy how certain words and syllables like that catch on like they do. But anyway, I'm just asking people politely to stop it if they can. But apparently this is a fairly regular thing that I observe and have gotten used to over time in my life. So anyway, and you may see it yourself in whatever you happen to be doing one day, or whoever you're talking to, or watching on the computer or television, so forth. But anyway, say, hey, I'm going to stop it right here, and see, it's already happening, right? And thank you again, of course, for joining me this week. I'm so glad that you take a few minutes out of your busy day or week to stop by the forest and visit with me here. We live in a really good world and a really good, potentially really good, what's the word? Zeitgeist or ambiance or whatever. I mean, it's all an attitude. It's all how you look at things. But I'm grateful to you. I'm always imploring you to tell your family and friends about the show, and as well as whoever you meet, wherever you meet, whether it's at the grocery store or church or Whataburger or school, whatever it may be. And hit the subscribe button, share the show, I should say. You are welcome to direct message me or comment and like after or in the post itself. And anyway, with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up today. This is your host, Frank Weber, signing off from It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. And say, hey, I'll see you next week. Love you. Bye.